Well, first off, I guess we should get into the carbon tax that has passed the House and they're now putting into the Senate. It's my personal view that with this carbon tax, they're essentially setting up the mechanism to do complete land grabs and infringe on the Fourth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, and civil liberties all across the board. What's your opinion on the carbon tax?
It's much worse than that. The carbon tax is a fraud, but it's also a fraud which intended to kill lots of people. Because, first of all, the fraud is the fact, that we look at carbon dioxide and its role in the economy, in the ecology. The idea of putting a tax on that as the cause for global warming is a complete fraud.
Right.
So I say, why do they do that? Well, because if you put this policy through, you force a collapse of the population, increase the death rate, by economic means as well as others.
Right.
And you don't do anything for the natural landscape. The natural landscape is based on an economy which is based on the miraculous power of chlorophyll to transform solar power into a power of a higher order of energy flux density, whereby we get the byproducts of this process, of the chlorophyll process. And from that, most of our landed economy and living conditions depend. We have a shortage of green. And the best way to get green is don't use these solar reflectors, don't use these other things. All they do is heat up the environment. They're a waste of time. They're inefficient. What we should do is think about making more green by using our water management systems and so forth, so that we cover more of our landscape with grasses and other things, and also trees, which are most efficient engines of creating the conditions for human life. So what this involves is a general scheme, as Prince Philip of the World Wildlife Fund says, to reduce the world's population rapidly to less than 2 billion people from presently 6.7.
More globalist policies.
Yeah, well, the globalism is another word for imperialism. Imperialism is coincident with the concept of a monetarist system, which when you have a so-called free market, you've created a monetarist system where money is more powerful than governments. Therefore, those who control money above the level of government control governments and create, in effect, empires. We've had, for example, an imperial system has prevailed in Europe since the period of the Peloponnesian War, which was over the attempt to form an empire in the Mediterranean. And since that time, you've had a consistent imperial drive in Europe, which we here were an exception. The United States, or what became the United States, was founded by people who intended to take the best of European civilization, but move it across the ocean away from the European oligarchy and have a free society here, which we had first in the Massachusetts Bay Colony between 1620 and 1688, between the Plymouth Colony and so forth. And so the purpose is to maintain a world empire, to dumb down the world population, strip away technology, reduce people to serfdom or something equivalent to that, and to run a permanent empire. We in the United States were, because of our achievement, apart from all the problems we had, but our achievement was to create a model for sovereign nation states as the unit of organization of society, where you had a sovereign nation state would absorb culture, as the distinction of a national language culture, for example. But then you would have a system, world system, which would fit the requirements of humanity, but nation by nation, and therefore you really had to deal with the problem of cooperation among nations. And then to innovate and progress, to make discoveries, improve things. And so this whole business, this policy came specifically from Prince Philip of the World Wildlife Fund.
Right. In fact, the science that they use actually came from the United Nations Council. The phony science that they're using to say that carbon is actually responsible for global warming comes not from independent scientists, but directly from the United Nations.
Yeah, from Julian Huxley and company in the United Nations back, after his crazy brother. But that's how it was done, exactly. So it's a manipulation policy intending to destroy modern civilization, to rapidly reduce the level of the population of the planet to less than 2 billion people, rapidly, from 6.7. And we could actually handle that if we have enough scientific progress. For example, the use of nuclear fission power brings us into a different chemistry. The problem is that as mankind expands population, we tend to use up the most efficient types of natural resources, which are concentrated where they were left by living processes. Mineral material generally were deposited in concentration process. Now, in order to get that benefit, when the mineral quality is deteriorating, you have to increase the energy flux density. You have to go to a higher density, higher temperature, in effect, of processes. And now we've reached the point that to maintain a population of the size we're talking about now, we need a general nuclear power. It's needed especially for water, because we have a worldwide water crisis. We don't have fresh water. We used to get out of a tap. You can't. Now you get a little funny little bottle. Well, who knows what's in it? So it's a general process of social engineering.
Are you familiar at all with the Georgia Guidestones?
This thing is another Freemasonic kind of cult operation, of which there's a proliferation in European civilization.
The reason why I brought it up was because you were alluding to earlier in one of the speeches I've seen you in about how you say they're going to take the world population down to maybe 2 billion, maybe 1 billion, maybe less. On these stones, it actually says the intended world population, the optimum population would be 500 million people.
Yeah.
And clearly, there's now legislation that we're seeing. They're putting it in place. I mean, not only with this carbon tax, but also, like you've stated in previous speeches, with this new healthcare bill they have coming up.
Absolutely.
Would you like to allude to the healthcare bill and your thoughts on that?
That's it. It's exactly. This is what we call it the British Empire. But the mistake is to think of the British kingdom, or the three-power kingdom, as being the empire. It's not. It's a residence of a capital of an empire. The empire is the international monetary system.
Right.
So when you look at the alliance between Prince Philip and the now happily deceased Prince Bernhard, the two of them founded this World Wildlife Fund. Now, what they represent is they represent the Anglo-Dutch liberal system, which is neither Dutch nor British. What it represents is people who are based, their headquarters, in these locations, but they're actually worldwide financial oligarchy or a monetary oligarchy. So that you don't have nation states in the true sense. For example, in Europe, continental Europe, there is no nation state up to the Russian border. No real nation states. It's simply one big empire now, controlled by Anglo-Dutch monetarist interests for a one world system, like, shall we say, the Tower of Babel all over.
Right.
So that's your empire, and it's this imperial interest which is threatened by the nation state as a sovereign nation state, or institution of sovereign nation states, which is the problem. If we have our way, we're going to better the condition of mankind. We're going to concentrate on those things that do, and we're going to try to discourage those things that don't. And we're concerned about the human being and what the human being can do, not as an animal, but as a human being. And we are an enemy of the empire, because the empire prefers to have a planet mostly populated by serfs or slaves. And therefore, we are in the way. So the attempt has been to destroy the United States, because the British were able to do this repeatedly in Europe, but they couldn't do it here. So without getting rid of us, if we stand up on our hind legs instead of walking on all fours, we won't put up with it. And I don't think the American people will want to put up with it. My job is to catalyze the situation where they're able to resist it.